I am Shanice Miller, and welcome to my podcast, Do Less. Yes, that's right, do less. It used to be cool to work 60 hours a week, but the world has gotten smarter and realized why spend more time to make the same or less money. I help small business owners build systems and processes to help them scale and find more time for themselves and their families. I'm going to provide you the best practices and all the tools and tips to scale your business. Welcome to my show.
Thank you for joining me on my Do Less show. I'm your host, Shanice Miller, where I show business owners just like you how they need to do less or they won't have a business in the long term. I know that all of us has experienced being too afraid to charge how much you're worth. You're afraid that if you charge what you really want, that no one will buy your services and products, so you underprice yourself. I've been there, and I've mulled over these same questions. How much should I price my services or my course? Should I sell it for a low price to many people? What if no one buys at the price that I want? I had a client, and I just spoke to about pricing her services as well, so she could get out of the weeds and spend less time doing so many custom proposals. A big portion of our talk was about having the confidence in the value that you bring to your clients, where you know that what you have to offer can change your client's life and that your clients are happy to exchange the money that they have in their pocket for the value that they want from you. And today, I'm bringing Josh Hall on the show to share his experience on how he got stuck in his business because of his money mindset. Josh was an amazing and a successful web designer who transitioned to being a web design coach and has taught thousands of other web designers and aspiring web designers how to start and grow their own dream web design agencies that gives them the freedom and the life that they love. And he's just launched his new course, Web Designer Pro. I wanted him to share that with you. I've been in this situation with being afraid and conflicted on how I should price my services before, and you might be in the exact situation right now. So I wanted Josh to share with all of us who might be in that place to understand that there is a path out. Josh, so glad you're on the show today. What was that point for you where you were stuck with your money mindset and how to price your services?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's like, so there's two different businesses that I've had. I had my web design agency and then now my online course creation business and coaching. And I do still have money mindset issues. It's like, I don't think you ever graduate from.
So they never go away.
They never go away. But you do learn how to deal with them better. And I think you learn how to get past them quicker, which was a big difference from when I started. I mean, so the first business, my freelance business, my money mindset issues, I mean, you said in the beginning, you get stuck. And that's how I felt. I was literally like stuck in pricing mud. I don't know what we want to call it.
How did it feel to be stuck in that pricing mud?
It was terrible. My first website I charged $300 for.
Wow.
And it's impossible and I thought that was a lot of money. Like, that's how bad my pricing mindset was. My pricing mindset, I think this often stems from your background and your past and your family sometimes too. Like, I just come from a normal middle of the road working class like family in Columbus, Ohio. So none of my family are business owners or entrepreneurs. And so I didn't really have a sense of profit or rates that would account for taxes and expenses and profit. So, like, I was just excited, like $300, holy cow. And then the first time I sold a website for $1,000, I was like, holy cow. Yes. But then I realized one of the ways I stayed stuck is I kept my rates, even at the $1,000 range. I kept them to a point where I could not grow to my goals, essentially. So I got to a point where I had my eyes set and my sights set on six figures, $100,000, but I was still charging $1,000 per website. So
that's a lot of websites that you have to actually get through in order to get to that six figures. What's that calculation? How many websites would you have to do per month or so?
Exactly. Yeah, you'd have to do 100 websites a year.
Okay.
To make six figures. So, oh no, I hate doing live math. Why did I do this to myself? So whatever that is, it's like, 100 by 12, like it's a ton of sites per month. And it's not practical. So this is one thing I help a lot of my students with now. It's like, you literally need to write your business out on a spreadsheet or on paper does your price point and your price ranges, do they literally set you up for success? Otherwise, you're likely going to just have to work 80 or 90-hour weeks in order to hit a goal, but no one wants to do that. So
Yeah, I love
I think
that.
that's the ways I got stuck in the beginning.
So what do you think is a price point that is good for a web designer to charge in order to hit that? And it's kind of like that, it's manageable to do a website.
Yeah, for web design, I typically say 5,000 is a good medium range, and it depends on the other services you have around that. I teach my students how to build maintenance plans and care plans and hosting and some additional services to help support your clients. Because the cool thing about that is with web design, you don't need that many clients.
Mhm.
If they're paying you $5,000 a year, or maybe up to $10,000 a year or more, depending on your services, you could get 10 clients. If they're each paying you 10 grand, you could make $120,000 that year. So you don't need that many, but 5,000 is a good practical, like attainable range to get to as far as like an average site. That's where I built my 6-figure business as a web designer, was the $5,000 on average. I had projects that I would go to 3,000. I had some that were 10, 15, but most of them were around the $5,000 range.
Okay, and that sounds pretty reasonable for most people. How'd you get that courage and that confidence to start charging five when $300 and $1,000 seem like such a big feat in the very beginning?
Yeah, I think I realized, well, it was years. It was not like overnight. Unfortunately, I didn't go through a course. I didn't have a coach that said, Josh, you're charging way too low.
So what made you not decide to get a course or to do a coach that talked to you about pricing?
I have this terrible innate nature to just try to do things myself, which
That's a money mindset.
right? It's a
Exactly.
mindset. Yeah. I didn't know anything about the business world at all. So I got started back in 2009. I used to be a cabinet maker for a tour bus customizing shop and a drummer in a rock band. So I had no sense.
That's completely different.
Completely different. I never went to college or school for it. I had no sense of business. So I was an accidental entrepreneur, fumbled my way into it. And yeah, money mindset was probably the biggest thing that held me back, because I felt like in the beginning, I felt like no one would pay me much. I felt like I wasn't good enough. But even as I started getting better and better and more valuable, I was still stuck in this money mindset. So I was building $5,000 websites for like $500, basically.
Wow.
And it finally took to the point where over years, I would raise my rates a little bit to the like $1,000, $1,500 range. And then I finally got a lead for a really good trucking company. And I knew this was a big trucking company in Columbus, and they had a budget. So I was like, you know what? I don't remember if I read something or saw something or where the spark came from, but I was just like, I'm just going to like charge like $4,000, just get wild and just like, what's the worst that can happen? I don't get that project. It's fine. And they went for it. They didn't even blink an eye at it. And that taught me like, wow. The moral of the story with this lesson is that I realized my client's money mindset is very different than my money mindset.
Yes.
And if you work with a serious client, they're focused on what's going to give them an ROI on their investment of this website to build their business. So it is worth 5, 10, 15,000, maybe tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes, I had that same experience where I was going out saying like, maybe I should just charge $1,000. And this is when my initial business, way back in the day when I was just starting out in 2012, and not sure what to charge, worried about the value that I bring, not confident in that value that I bring to each client. So just saying like, maybe I should just charge them a little, maybe $497, maybe $997. And I got to that same point as you did, where I just got that courage and I said, let me just ask this person and charge them $5,000 for this service. And that person did not blink. And so that kind of brings me back to now that you look back on when you were charging $500 for your services, how do you feel about that, about cutting yourself so much that...
I mean, in the beginning, I was honestly just pumped to get business. I came from a world of being a blue-collar worker where I was making $11 an hour. So I thought 500 was amazing. However, like I said in the beginning, there were all these other aspects that I did not factor in, like taxes, like expenses, like admin work. And then I found myself making less money on some projects than I did working for that tour bus customizing shop.
Wow.
Some projects I made like, oh, it was terrible. It was like, I'm working hard. I'm working way longer, way harder. And yes, if you told somebody I just sold a website for $500, they don't know the industry. They're like, wow, you know, that's incredible. But they don't see all the hours of work and content collections and things that go back. So yeah, it really, it made me mad. And then I realized like, okay, I've got to start raising my rates. And then it just took time and confidence every project to finally get over that hurdle. But again, it was because I went solo. It was really because I did everything on my own. I wasn't a part of a community at the time. I didn't have a coach. That is why I do what I do now, because I want to help Josh from 10 years ago. Give them the resources they need to bust out of their own mindset. It was just really important, because if I had just known people are charging way more for the exact work you're doing, it would have changed the game. And I certainly don't regret my path, but I just made things way more harder, and it took way longer to, in my case, get to six figures. It took me 6 years to get to six figures. And some of my students are getting to six figures in 1 or 2 years now. So
I think that's amazing. Amazing that you're showing your students how quickly that they can get to six figures, and how it doesn't have to take 6 years like a lot of people would tell you, and that you don't have to grind it out either to get to six figures, because that's another big myth that I see as well, which is like, you can sleep when you die. I hate that. I'm such a big advocate of doing less, of making sure that we have time for that work-life balance. Like you talked about, making sure you're prioritizing your family, having time for your family and the things that makes life enjoyable.
Yeah, that also leads to sustainability. Like no matter, so when I started my business, I was single, I was living with my dad. I didn't, I don't.
You can grind it out.
I know all the time in the world, but that's actually the problem. Is it Parkinson's law that says if you give yourself a certain amount of time to do a task, it'll take that amount of time. So it's like, I could work 24/7, and I did a lot of those first couple years. Now it's completely different because I have 3 kids. I don't work that much, but the time I do work is extremely focused and prioritized. So that's one thing too to remember, is like early on, the more you can build a lot of output in a little amount of time, that is key, because it really goes back to sustainability. Because I don't care anyone who says I can just work 24/7, I feel great, it will catch up to you. And at the end of the day, is that really what you want to do? And then you never know where life's going to take you. Even if somebody doesn't have a family, but they want to travel, like if you're used to working 90 hours a week, you're not going to be able to travel. So, but if you're used to working like 20 hours a week in blocks and segments, you could totally travel and do things remotely. So I think it's a very, very important muscle to build early on.
Yes, I agree. I completely agree. Now, could you take us back to that time where your mindset switched, your money mindset, and you decided to first invest in a coach? How was that process for you? How did that feel? And why did you decide to finally make that turn?
So I was in a networking group, and that's where a lot of my business came from. And there was a business coach in there, part of a program called Action Coach Business Coaching. And they tried to get me to join for like 2 years. And I just
So why didn't you join?
What's that?
Why didn't you join in those 2 years before?
I just didn't want to commit to it. And quite honestly, I was a little content I was a solopreneur. I was running my own business my way. At that point, I had pretty good systems and processes in place. But what took me over the edge is I was finding myself becoming more interested in being the business owner. I didn't want to do all of the things anymore. I started getting bored doing like every aspect of websites. And I had also started teaching web design at this point as kind of a passion project. So I wanted to free up my time. So that's when I joined that program. And they really, over 6 months, helped me shape into a business owner mindset, to delegate faster, to prioritize things, to raise rates, to do all the things that I'm sure you help a lot of folks out with, and I do to teach people to be the owner of the business. And I still had my hands in some of the aspects of deliverables and client design and stuff like that, but it did help me go from doing all the things in the business to doing only the things that I wanted to do or should do as the business owner.
Okay. I think that's a very important thing to note and to mention, is that we're getting so wrapped up in doing all of the little things, doing a lot of the customer services, customer delivery, that we are losing out on the time and the important things, which are the marketing and the sales, getting those clients in and then being able to hand that work off into.
Yeah, the other thing that I see a lot of my students struggle with, it's a good problem to have, but it is a challenge, and this is what happened to me, is I had 23 projects at
Wow.
once. And they weren't all massive builds, but some of them, I consider a project anything that's going to take more than 4 hours.
Yeah.
So I literally had like hundreds of hours, and I'm like, I cannot do this as a solopreneur. So I had just started getting some help at that point, and I had just been through that business training, and that's what helped me. So actually, it's funny. I had one student recently who was in the exact same boat as I am, or was. She had ran her business for 7 years. She loved being a solopreneur, loved doing all of it. But I told her, like, I feel like you're at the cusp of scaling. I think you should at least get your systems and processes in place and start to delegate. And then the same thing happened to her. She got absolutely swamped. And then on top of that, not even, I think 6 months later, this was last year in 2022, she got cancer. She got diagnosed with cancer. And luckily, I think she's done with all of her chemo and everything. She's really on the rebound. She's doing great. But I say that to say, she had already started scaling her business and being the business owner. Mm-hmm. So her money mindset struggle was just delegating and
letting go
of the control. But she did that. And she even messaged me recently and said, thank God you helped me do that, because what would I do? Like, I can't, she couldn't do chemo and all this stuff, manage everything herself.
And I think so many people, and my dad was one of them, where he got sick. He had a declining health issue that came completely out of nowhere. He was completely healthy, not to compare them, but just like someone with cancer, one day you're healthy and then the next day you get diagnosed and you're wondering, you still have this business to run. And if you are that bottleneck, you're that person who is deep involved in the day-to-day, has your hands in everything, and your workers or your employees cannot work without you, your business will not survive if you have to be out of that business for a month, 2 months, 3 months, because chemo is something that's long-term. And unfortunately, my dad's declining health was something that was very long-term and unforeseeable.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, whether it is a health situation, like unfortunately like what your dad went through, or in my case, what my student went through, or even if it's just you don't know what you want to do or change in your business in the future, it is good to not be the bottleneck.
Yes.
Like you said, it is good to delegate some tasks, because you just never know what's going to happen. Or in some cases, one day you may be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I need to get rid of, and then if you're doing everything, this is why people burn out or start disappearing from their clients. So I do think even if you want to be a solopreneur and do most things yourself, you can still automate things and delegate tasks. And it goes back to, I know we're talking money mindset, like the big money mindset shift is losing the control and being comfortable with investing in a team and investing people. Like, you're not going to take $5,000 on this project. Now you're going to give $1,500 or $2,000 to a designer. However, what I learned is that frees up so much time for me to sell more.
Much time.
Yeah, like that's the big mental shift that I went through when I scaled my agency before eventually selling it. Is yes, I wasn't personally making as much on each project, but we could take on way more work. And for me, it freed me up to do my passion, which is to teach. So.
And how did that make you feel? Because I know from my experience, being able to breathe, having that time free up is just so important to me.
Yeah, that was key. There was some beautiful things about scaling that I felt. One was that feeling of having some free time and knowing work is getting done. Another one, I remember Jonathan, my designer at the time who I hired, he was essentially a subcontractor, part-time, and he is based in Melbourne, Australia. And what was cool is the first time I had like a full day of work for him, I got all the tasks written out in Basecamp and had it all organized. I knew you would like that, Shanice. Got it all organized for him, all planned out. And then I went to sleep. And then I woke up the next day and like half the website was done.
Awesome. And
because he was working while I was sleeping. And it was like, wow, it was the first taste of in delegation. Like, I was sleeping and a ton of work for the business got done. And now it's just
done correctly because you had mapped out exactly what it is you needed. And that's exactly what we help our clients with, is with that mapping out, being able to hand it over to someone so you still have that same high quality and high service that you would provide, but you can hand it over to someone else to do those same things. So that's simply awesome.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many beautiful moments of scaling. And yeah, there's challenges, there's hardships. And I think one thing to keep in mind with scaling and delegating is it does often take some time up front to put your processes in place, particularly, God forbid, if it's all in your head and you don't have any standard operating procedures in place. Yes, there will be some time involved, but it very quickly starts to reverse. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I have like a ton of time. Eventually, I got to the point where all I did was assist with the proposal for a project, and then everything else was to Jonathan. Client communication, deliverables, and then I swooped in at the end to close things out. I was essentially kind of like the project manager / creative director.
Yes, and that's a lovely feel. I know we talked earlier about how you had a child who had a couple of issues along with a newborn kid. So now, knowing that you were able to delegate things out, how did that help you during helping your children, your family, being able to be there for them during this, the newborn baby and having a sick child?
Yeah, I mean, recently my family went through a really, really challenging time. I have 3 littles. One had a prolonged seizure, essentially, without getting too far into the weeds into it. She had an 8-day hospital stay at our children's hospital. That same week that happened, my son was born. And I have another daughter who was at home with grandparents. So it was a really, really challenging time. But one thing I learned, and it might be different because the business model is different now with courses and what I don't do services anymore. So I was able to scale and sell courses at all times unless I do a launch or something. So I still had money coming in like that. But regardless, I think it is really important in that case to either have a plan for like some unexpected time off. I think it's good for everyone to make sure that you have at least, like if you didn't work for a month, you're okay. You can at least have some savings and enough for expenses and stuff, and have 0 sales come in and you'll be okay. That's the goal to get to. I mean, I think probably it's good to get to like 3 months. I realize it's hard depending on the business, but at least a month would buy you time to get through generally what's going to happen. But one thing I learned too is the power of recurring income. And when I was a web designer, when my daughter was born, who we had this recent medical emergency, back when she was born in 2018, she had a 56-day NICU stay, the newborn intensive care. And what got us through that was our maintenance plan, the recurring income coming through supporting sites and clients. And I told a lot of clients, listen, we're in a really tough season and it's going to be a little delayed on projects. I didn't take as much on. And everyone was so cool. They understood that. Like, people are people. They're going to understand that. However, you do still have to, as a business owner, get stuff done and be able to sell during those time periods. So yeah, I think recurring income, having a team to delegate and pass off tasks to, even if they're just contractors, you can give them more things to do and they'll step up to the plate in that situation. It's key. It's key to be able to get through that. I mean, the reality is if you go it alone in situations like that, it's going to crumble in pretty quick amount of time.
I think that's such an important point that you made too, because your life's a stay-at-home wife. So it's not like you had an additional income that you could fall back on during these times. Your income, you are that sole provider, as many of us business owners are. Our business is our sole income. And so if we don't have other people, other employees to fall back on, if we are doing everything, we're not doing less in our business, then once something happens like that, our whole business will crumble. But luckily for you, you had those systems in place, you set things up, and you had that mindset right where all of these things really came together.
And this was actually probably harder this last time around with what we went through with my daughter, because it was just me and the personal brand. Back in 2018, I was only running my business. So I'd already been working with Jonathan. He did a ton of work. I had a couple other subcontractors at the time who filled in. In this case, it's like, it's me. So who shows up for coaching calls? I do. Luckily, my courses are on demand, so they sell frequently throughout weeks and months. So it's like I didn't really need to do a launch or anything special. But when the time came for like me to do coaching, it's me. So I say that to say the good thing that I learned in this case was that I'm a part of a web design community and I have an incredible network. And I actually had Eric, who eventually bought my agency. He used to be a student of mine who purchased my agency. He's now my CEO. He filled in for me for a few weeks. He did a couple podcast episodes for me because I have a podcast. And he just let everyone know, hey, Josh is going through a lot right now. He did a couple podcast episodes. He filled in my web design membership. I have a community, a membership, and he filled in for a couple of weeks and did live Q&As to step in for me. So even in this business, you can still surround yourself with people who can help when those moments of life happen, which is inevitable. Life is going to happen, whether it's a sick parent or an illness yourself or cancer, whatever it is, or a sick child. It's, those things, the reality, I hate being a pessimist, but stuff is going to happen. So you do have to have some sort of contingency plan to at least get you past those seasons.
Yes, those are all very important points. And I think that brings us to our final question, which is doing less is a way of life for me. And I've heard so much of what you're doing now to do less. And that's incredible that people are able to step in there and help you out, even as you are the brand now. What are you doing now along with that? And besides that, or in addition to that, are you doing to do less in your business and life? And how has that significantly changed your life?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a great question, Shanice, because I feel like the big aha moments for me recently have been like, what can I do less of?
Yes.
What can I continue to get off my plate? I'm like, I'm always, once you start delegating, it's addictive in a good way. It's like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I got to get this out. Got to get this out. So I hire out a lot. I mean, what's funny is, yes, I'm a personal brand, but I have like 7 people that I often hire work out to. I have a VA. I have a kind of side VA from the Philippines who will like help me. She helps me do a lot of website stuff and transferred all my courses over to my new membership. I've got a developer guy who does really advanced developer stuff on websites that I hire frequently. I've got a SEO guru who helps me out with SEO stuff. Like I have almost like a mini team in place that I call upon when needed to do just that, to be able to help me do what I do best. And it really comes down to that. You have to prioritize in a business. I think number one, what you want to do, and that gives you energy, because I've learned if there is a task that I just dread doing, I'm going to do everything I can to not do that thing again.
Me too.
Yes. And that's hard, particularly for somebody who likes control. I think most all business owners are kind of control freaks. So we usually have to like get out of our own way. So I think what gives you energy is really important. Another biggie is, what are you well suited for? And being very, very self-aware about that. I can code, but I am not a great coder. It will take me like 3 hours to do something that Christian, my developer guy, could do in 5 minutes. So I'm like, you know what? I could do this. I could spend an afternoon doing this, but then I couldn't do this interview with Shanice. I couldn't create my own podcast. I couldn't do coaching. And it's not that I'm better than the coding work. It's just like, these are the things that only I can do. So you need to do those. So that's my big takeaway on that is prioritize only what you can do and that gives you energy, and then get everything else off your plate as much as you can to focus on that stuff. Because generally, side note, those will be the things that moves the needle, quote unquote, forward for a business.
Yes. I love all of that. So thank you for coming on, Josh. If people want to learn more about your new course, Web Designer Pro, and what you do, please let them know where to find you.
JoshHall.co. That has all the stuff. You were a guest on my podcast recently. I'm the host of the Web Design Business Podcast, if anyone wants to check that out. So yeah, go to JoshHall.co and search Shanice, and you'll find our conversation. That's where I'd recommend people go to check it out.
Well, it's been such a pleasure. Listeners, please be sure to subscribe to the show and leave a rating and a review.